Welcome to Creative Right Now, the first interview podcast to help give you some motivation and help you really elevate your craft as a creative writer. This is a brand new podcast segment where I'm going to be sitting down with different published authors and different industry professionals to give you ideas, to give you insight, and to really help you improve the writing process. I'm Kauffman, and I'm on a journey to help creative writers really grow their toolkit so that way they can tell the stories that they want to tell. So, in today's episode, we're going to actually be sitting down and chatting with published author Mike Klaassen. And he just published his brand new book, How to Write a Novel That Matters. So, we're going to be digging into how do you really tell a story that matters? A little about Mike. He crafts thought-provoking narratives and action-packed stories about young protagonists grappling with formidable challenges. His three novels, The Brute, Cracks, and Backlash, a War of 1812 novel, each earned a B.R.A.G medallion, distinguishing them for their quality among independent publications. Driven by a passion for continuous learning and research, Mike delved into the art of storytelling, producing a series of insightful books about the craft of writing fiction. These works offer practical guidance for aspiring writers and illuminate the intricate processes behind compelling storytelling. This podcast is going to be perfect for aspiring writers seeking motivation and a community that understands the unique challenges of blending life's trials, creative expression. This chat is going to provide tools and inspirations to make your stories creative. All right, and let's bring on Mike Klaassen, and let's welcome him to the stream. Welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you, Jared. Thank you for having me on your
All
show.
right, Mike, and you are on. Welcome to the stream. Yeah,
Happy
thank
to
you
be
so
here.
much. Thank you for joining me. It looks like I have. Thank you. I'm just like checking into the comments here. Hey, what's up, Stephanie? Welcome to the stream, my friend. We're having, I'm setting a new style for the podcast. Mike, they're usually my creative writers. They're used to seeing me in the beanie and a t-shirt. So I was like, I'm mixing it up today, make it a little bit more professional.
Okay.
So first off, I want to say thank you for joining me today. I was researching your book and I was looking at authors who've published books about the writing process. If the stream skips at all or if I miss anything. Okay. Classy is more like it. Awesome. Thanks, Sol. I appreciate it. So a lot of my goals is for really helping writers to really improve their craft and learn things that really help them just improve the process. Now, I knew that you were the perfect candidate, Mike, because you literally just like came out and published this novel, which is about the art of storytelling. Now, before we dig into the novel itself, I just had a couple questions. So I just want to start off with some really easy questions. And the first one that I always love to ask every single creative writer I meet: what does creative writing mean to you?
Oh, good question. In my mind, I don't think so much about creative writing. What I do when I'm writing is I try to put onto paper or digital record uh, words that will stimulate a particular emotion for the writer, the reader, and to generate a certain effect. And I guess the creativity comes in how to do that. And a lot of what my efforts are in writing books about the craft of writing fiction are about how to make that happen. And it's a journey I began many, many years ago when I have probably 100 books about writing, craft of writing fiction on my shelves.
Like all of us, we have our whole like catalog of unpublished works in our background. I know many of you who are listening and watching probably can relate with this.
Oh yes, yes. One of my goals was to, I said a long time ago, was to figure out how it worked, because the books on my shelf seemed like they had gaps in the knowledge. It just wasn't all adding up. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Okay. So, and I know that, okay, so you really wanted to fill the gap of telling theme. Now, when you think about like the writing process, and I know you said like you probably have like hundreds of books in your catalog, I always have to know, like I need to know this from every writer. I was such a weirdo. I started out writing a Super Mario series when I was like 6, 7 years old, and I thought I could like retell the franchise and do it better with stick figures. What when you think about to the beginning of your writing journey, how did you start writing? Was there like a moment of inspiration? Was it like a thing that happened, or was it a process?
Well, in terms of fiction writing, it began when my first wife, who's since passed away, when she was at home with our two sons, she needed some mental stimulation, and she signed up for a course on how to write fiction. And when I would come home from work, she and I would sit down and visit about what she had learned and what she had written. I would review her work and offer some ideas. And she was successful in getting, a couple of articles published in magazines. But over time, she moved on to other interests. And but the bug stuck with me, and I started writing. And I can remember the moment I started, exactly where I was. I was at Winchell's Donut Shop, which happens to be a few miles just to the west of where I'm right now. With
Because who doesn't love a good donut with the book? Okay.
yes, I was with a big crystal ballpoint pen and a yellow Lego pad, and I said, I'm gonna write a story, and I started right there. I did not know how to use a computer at that point.
So you said with the ballpoint pen and a
Yes,
notepad.
yep, that's right, yellow Lego pad, and a
I
cup of
actually
and a cup of coffee.
I can totally relate with that. I was that weirdo who sat in the back of the class growing up, working and writing my epic fantasy story in notebooks. My first story probably ended up to about 10 to 15 just notebooks worth. It was like before the digital age. Oh, that's awesome. And it looks like Stephanie can totally relate with that. When so in that moment, like you were just getting started, what do you remember what that first story was that you wrote?
I I remember exactly because it's my first novel I published. I
That
did.
is so wonderful. By the way, that's absolutely amazing. Just and if you're watching this, like the first story, and how long ago was that?
Oh, it was over 20 years ago now.
Over 20 years ago.
Probably
So
25. Yeah.
so that was about 20 to 25 years ago. You remember writing that. About how long did it take you to from that first moment at Winchell's where you're with your coffee and your donut to the moment when you got it published? How long what was that process like for you?
I did not keep track of the time frame.
Okay.
I'm not a fast reader or a fast writer, and
Mhm.
this is all part time with a full time job
As it
and
is
a
for most. Mhm.
family to take care of. The but the process was very much, sitting down and, writing those first words down, and then, going as far as I could toward the end, and, making, getting the story on. That's the hardest part of writing a novel, is just getting it all down
Mhm.
even in a very rough first draft. And, my thinking, my process has been, I would write something, and then I'd get a new book about the craft of writing. I'd learn more, and then I go back and rewrite what I had already written, and then I revise my story, and I just repeat the process over and over again. Write, learn more,
Yeah.
revise, learn more,
So
write some more, just keep on going.
so then how do you stop yourself from revising it and wanting to just rewrite it forever?
Well,
Like, because once it's published, you can come out with a second edition, right? And then a third edition, and then you
well,
just keep coming out with new editions,
the,
right?
the in my particular case, I keep going, and rewriting until I feel I can't improve it anymore.
Okay.
And when I think I've got it as good as I can get it, I go to the best editor I can find and afford, and ask that editor to critique it uh, and they typically come back with all kinds of red marks over what I thought was already a perfect story. And then you start the process over again.
Mhm.
And I've heard before many authors really enjoy the revision process, and
Mhm.
I do too. So I don't fight it. It's just going to take as long as it takes. And
Okay.
when it's as good as I can get it, then it's ready to publish. And that includes a final proofread.
Interesting. So it sounds like your process, like you'll generally take the time doing the rough draft, maybe like a second or third draft potentially, until you get it ready for an editor to send it back to you. You go through that revision process, and then you take it through a couple more drafts, and then it's finally at that ready to be published stage.
As many as it takes. Yes, yes. And I'll probably go through three different editors. One is kind of a developmental editor that looks at the big picture. Then there's a copy editor that takes care of sentences and paragraphs and whatnot. And the final thing, when I think I've got it perfect, you send it to a professional proofreader, and
Mhm.
they still find errors. It's amazing. No matter how, even when I get my friends to read through it, they still find errors. The professionals do.
Do you think that's because the editing process can at times it can be a subjective process?
Well, certainly
Mhm.
subjective, but also the professionals often point out good things, but they also point out things that I disagree with. I always
Mhm.
put when I get an edited manuscript back, I use three different boxes. One is I look at what they say and I say, "Oh, yeah, they got it. I'll take what they recommend and go with it." And there's others I say, No, forget that. I'm right. I've got it right." And the third bucket is, well, I see the point, but I'm going to change it in a different way than they recommended. And it's always a three-step process or three categories.
Interesting. So when you're looking at editor's notes and you're going through the revision process, you kind of have 3 different brackets for whether you're going to keep it or take it. The reason I say this is because I know a lot of writers that I speak with, and a lot of newer writers struggle with receiving feedback from editors or receiving just feedback in general. Sometimes I see that writers think that if somebody edits it, I need to take everything. I need to change all the things, or maybe I need to change none of the things because I disagree. How did you find that, like, that balance between, like, okay, I'm going to keep this, I'm going to not use this?
Well, you have to remember that you, the author, are in charge. It's your decision. It's your
Mhm.
book. Your name's going on it. The editor is a hired gun, somebody
Yep.
you hopefully respect, and
Yep.
it's not like going to the doctor where you really ought to obey their advice. Although I don't always, but it's your decision and it's your book, and you live with the consequences. But you also have to have a thick skin. There are a number of authors, I suspect too many, that can't take criticism, so they don't get the benefit of editing because it's too painful,
Mhm.
or they disagree or they argue. And I never disagree with the editor. I just don't either take their advice or don't and move on.
I was like, that's probably not a good working relationship if your editor's trying to argue with you. Like, it's interesting because I do offer editing services through my business, but I always hear the stories and I always hear different, like, feedback from other writers who are working with certain editors, and I'm like, what type of experience is that? I'm probably just too people friendly. Maybe I'm just too nice. So let me ask you this. So I know early on you published your 3 fiction novels. Let's see, The Brute, Cracks, and Backlash, a War of 1812 novel. Can you kind of walk me through? So once those novels were published, what was that process like? Like, once you hit the publish, and I guess I'm assuming it was the self-publishing route. Can you kind of speak to what that experience was like once it was ready to publish?
Well, my first two novels, Brood and Cracks, were accepted by a traditional publisher,
Okay.
a small press, but they were traditional in that
And did you pursue, like, an agent or
oh,
a manager, or did you do it yourself?
I pursued many agents and never
Okay.
found one that picked me up. But I also, at the same time, was approaching publishers, and this small publisher accepted the brute, and I think it was, after I received like at least three dozen different rejection slips from various publishing companies.
Mhm.
But this one picked me up, and then I submitted cracks when I had it done, and they snapped it right up, and things are going along pretty good. I was very pleased, and I liked the people I was working with.
Okay.
But then remember what happened in 2008 or nine. You're a young guy, but I'm sure you remember the economy went bad. Well, a whole
Yep,
bunch of
remember hearing all about it.
a lot of small publishers went out of business, including mine.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Oh,
fortunately,
was it the same one for those first 2 books, right?
oh yes, but
Mhm.
both of them, and the publisher went out of business. And fortunately, the contract was written that if they ceased to send me royalties for the book sales, that the rights would revert back to me. And I have an entrepreneurial spirit, so I decided from then on I would publish independently, and I've been learning that process, and still am.
Mhm.
How that works and trying to make it work better.
Man, so that must have been such like defeating moment when your publisher went out of business. So
Well,
like what did you do once it went out of business? Was it then on you to keep marketing the books, or were you already on like, all right, I'm full steam ahead on the next one?
oh yes, I was definitely well in the works for the next one. But
Mhm.
I've been in business my entire career. Life was full of these setbacks. So after I quit cussing, I just rolled up my sleeves and found out a way to get them republished. And like many things, I learned that things the hard way by doing the wrong stuff first until you get it right. And I'm still
As
going.
we all, right? If only
I'm
we listened to what our parents told us when we were younger, right? We would
yes.
have been successful.
It's a process.
Oh man, I always hear my mom's words in the back of my head when I was pursuing my major, and I was thinking about like creative writing, I was thinking about a second degree, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stick with the arts because the arts is a lot of fun. And my mom's like, Jared, you want to pursue a business minor. You're going to need a business minor regardless of what you do in life. And I was like, nah, I'm only going to do arts. And now 10 years later, I'm starting a business. I'm like, Mom, you were right. um, awesome. So, by the way, I'm just pulling up some comments. So it sounds like you found it fun to see how your story changes over time. Yeah, from the core idea where the story starts all the way to like the finished product. That's literally such a journey. Mike, when you think about where the story starts during the rough draft, do you see an evolution throughout the process?
These days, I very definitely try to figure out how I'm going to end the story, so
Okay.
I don't do the proverbial paint myself into a corner that I can't get out of, or build a bridge to nowhere. Um,
Uh-huh.
so I try to have the ending. Now, by the time I get to the ending, it very likely will change, but it's more productive to have a goal of where you want to end up.
Okay.
The And part of the reason that with this theme book is that you you want to try to have a theme in mind as to where you're going with that too,
Mhm.
so you don't get the whole thing done and realize that that it didn't create the effect you wanted to.
Interesting. So, are you then you're a big proponent of kinda doing, like, the outline and the preparation method early on? So, like, you kinda know the direction you're going from the very early stage, so that's kinda like your guidepost?
Right. There's two extremes. There's the outliners and those that they call it seat of the pants, whatever. And
Yeah, the pantser and the plotter, those are
yeah,
the terms these days.
yeah. My heart is in the planning outline thing, and I try to do as much of that as I possibly can. But
Okay.
I lose patience and say to heck with it. I get anxious and I start writing, and then and it goes different than the outline. So you have to go back and create a different outline or just wing it. So I'm somewhere in between,
Okay.
I think that's probably the best answer for most people is have it put do an outline of as much as you can stand doing, and then dig into your writing. It'll take you a different direction in the outline whether you like it or not, and
Mhm.
then and just try to keep in mind where you're trying to end up, and so you don't build that bridge to nowhere. and and just keep working on it. And in the meantime, keep learning about how the craft works, because there's a lot to it. It's not easy. It's fun to learn. It's not easy.
That it is, right? It's such a learning process. And I think from what I see from a lot of writers, I see there's a lot of love for the creation, the early development, the ideation, and like bringing the stuff to life. And then a lot of burnout when it comes to sometimes the editing stage, taking it to that next level. Or what if like the story changes from the outline and it's like a whole different thing altogether? And I see that as those as a couple obstacles, especially for new writers. What would you say when you think back through like the process of writing a book? What would you say has been the greatest obstacle for you, and what's been kind of your strategy to work on it or overcome it?
One of the couple of the things that come to mind, because a couple possibilities there. One is that every day when I have an allocated time when I would write, and still do. And my goal is pretty simple. Every day that I start writing, my goal is to make progress. Some people say you got to write so many hundreds of words a day or whatnot. Well, if you're really a writer, if you're really into it, if you get to sit down and actually start writing, before you know it, an hour has gone by. And even though you say, well, I'm just going to try to make a little progress, maybe it'll just be 5 minutes, and you look at it's an hour or two has passed, and you're still going. And some days it doesn't work. So you don't beat yourself up. I don't beat myself up. I made a little progress. I'll move on. Another thing is that when I'm working on something, what bogs me down is if I spend too much time on any one particular spot, whether it's a chapter or a page or a scene or, because it gets stale in my mind. It's better to just move on, take it as far as you can, move on. It's all going to be garbage for a while anyway, especially the first draft. So just move on to the next scene, next chapter, and write it, get as much as you can. And try not to go back and make it perfect, because that's for later. Try to get from the beginning to the end as fast as you can, both in the first draft and each of the subsequent drafts. And don't count the number of drafts you're doing. Just you'll be done when it's as good as you can get it. And when your editor says, yeah, it's good, and it's ready, and just keep going, through the process over and over again, and that's how you get better at writing.
Mike, I think there's definitely a reason I resonate with you. That's a strategy that I definitely share all the time, right? To not get bogged down in the perfection of the moment of the scene, but to just finish the overall story, right?
And
like the first draft, like the thing that they're writing has to be like gold. It has to be perfect. I'm like, it's a process. The rough drafts are usually can be garbage sometimes. Sometimes they can be good, depending on like the type of writer. But the majority of the time, your rough draft usually has a lot of, say, opportunities.
One of my favorite quotes is from Ernest Hemingway. He said the first draft of anything is, I won't use the barnyard term that he referred to, but I subscribe to that the first draft of anything is manure. Okay.
Hemingway is always a favorite one of mine. Definitely a very stoic writer for sure. As I'm seeing some of the comments and the activity here, I just want to pull up a couple. Stephanie, when I have someone edit my work, I go with what sounds better reading it out loud. That's definitely a really good thing. I think sometimes as writers, when it's all in our head, and even sometimes when we get feedback from editors, it's still in our head or on the page. And this is something that I always recommend trying, is like print out a copy, read it aloud to yourself. Is that something that you've ever tried, Mike?
There's like many things in life, there are two hands. On one hand, that's good advice, because you're right, you hear it differently. On the other hand, there's a trap. The downside is that the readers of your work are very likely reading it silently, until the day with the audiobooks.
That is the truth, right? Unless they're listening to the audiobook. But if they're a classic reader, it's
Yep.
Mhm.
And if you're not careful by reading out loud, you may very well be putting inflection in your reading, or whoever you're asking to read it out loud, inflection that isn't there in your punctuation and actual words. So in my mind, I listen more to my inner voice
Mhm.
as I'm reading to and use that as my guide. I never read my own stuff out loud.
Interesting. I've actually never thought about that before. I've never thought about coming at it from the standpoint of how your inner voice could be changed by kind of hearing it either read out loud by somebody else.
Right.
Absolutely. I've never come at it from that standpoint before. That's interesting.
Because if you're reading something out loud, if you're listening to someone read out loud or yourself,
Mhm.
you don't necessarily hear the commas and the other punctuation things, or the pauses, even the
Mhm.
periods. So in our mind, we see those in pause, longer pause for a period than a comma.
Oh man. Okay, let's see. And then it looks like Soul said, I tried to make a full outline, every detail for the book I'm doing now, but it failed. Oh, Soul, I'm sorry. Sorry to hear that. I ended up going an entirely different direction and with a block that Jared actually. Oh, shucks, Soul. You're awesome. I appreciate that. It's Mike. I know I was telling you about my Saturday reading and critique show. I know a lot of my audience have submitted different stories before as part of just our creative writing community. And I always ask myself, right, because I only get to see little excerpts and sections of the stories. How do I give value to somebody? Like I'm doing a reading, right? So it's in their point of view. But then I'm like, all right, well, how do I try to like capture the voice of the story, right? Without having looked at it before. And then how do I give valuable insight based off like their goals, right? So that's always a challenge that I pose with myself. Let's see, but it looks like a soul has a question for you. So, how did you decide what should belong in your books and what should be scrapped?
Good question.
Mhm.
The number one thing is, if it's boring, get rid of it. If it's boring to you,
How do you determine boring though?
if
Is
if
it
you
like your like own perspective? Like I'm bored of reading this chapter. So what if you've read it like the same page like 100 times? Of course
yes,
they're going to be bored by default.
and that's why it's important to always be moving on. So when you come back
Mhm.
to that part of it, that
Mhm.
chapter, that page, it's fresher. Okay. And but yeah, get rid of all the boring stuff. And whether it's a published novel, I read them and I go, this is boring. My mom said, just skip that. If you have to, go to the back, go to the last chapter. Skip the boring stuff. And that's the number one rule. And the other part of it is, you got to use your brain too, and visualize what effect it's having on people. Are these the right words to say? Can I say it in fewer words? More word, too many words. If it's a slog to read, it's boring. You
Mhm.
need to you need to I strive for a style of writing that's clear and transparent, with to the point where somebody reading my books would say Mike has no style. There, it's just clear, straightforward writing. That's what
Mhm.
my objective is. I want the other parts of the book, the story, to come through the print without being uh, bogged down by my particular style. Other authors have a different style. They're more figurative in their writing, and uh, and interesting in some ways in their style. But
Mhm.
my style is to be straightforward and invisible.
Absolutely. And is that speaking more for the storytelling books, the books about how to develop craft, right?
It's in my case,
Or
it's
does that go the same for even like the fiction ones as well?
for in my case for both. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So that way the readers can really connect with the character itself as compared to less the author, more the character and the journey.
Right. I'm interested in the
Mhm.
characters. I'm interested in the setting, what the people are doing, the plot, and I try to keep my style, very plain and simple, but um, let the writing, show through, and what its effectiveness.
Awesome. That's actually really good advice and something I completely agree with. I think I see a lot of time from newer writers. They get trapped in certain parts of their story and they feel like, oh, I don't have the solution. So I'm just losing motivation and I'm going to walk away from it. But I think that the brilliant part is of your storytelling process. If you read something and you don't like it, change it.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes like if you don't have an idea, right? So it's like, for me, right? I've been writing this story of its fantastical story, post-apocalyptic fairy tale land, and I hit these parts in the story where I'm like, I have no clue what like I know the plot, I know the narrative, I know the direction, but in terms of specific scene, I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, I could on one end I could struggle with it. I could be like, all right, what's the perfect idea? Or on the other hand, I just ask myself, what would be the most fun thing to write in this very moment? Even if it doesn't even like make sense right now, I can I'll edit it down the line. I think as long as you're enjoying the process, I think that's absolutely to be commended. And I totally resonate with not wanting to get bored. Absolutely.
If you get bored or have a piece of writing that you're having trouble with, my advice is to set a goal for your customer and then
Mhm.
make it impossible for him or her to achieve it. So they've got an obstacle to overcome. Then you've created
Mhm.
a scene. Goal, obstacle, and this character's got to defeat the obstacle to get to the goal or fail, and then you move on.
Mhm.
There should be lots of failures.
There
If the
should be
customer,
lots of failures. Yeah.
yeah,
And I'm of the same mindset, right? If you're struggling to come up with the scene or come up with material for this specific scene, create like the most extreme obstacle for your character.
make
Let's
it
like make it harder for your characters. Let's
be
make it harder
cruel,
for them.
be cruel to your characters.
Be cruel to your characters. Oh, I know. I had to kill off one of my characters a couple weeks ago. I'm still crying on the inside.
One of my, well,
Let's see. I got a couple. Madzerker, how's it going? I'm heading to the woods with the kids. Yeah, thanks for stopping by, man. I appreciate you. And by the way, this is actually a good shout out. If you're watching this stream on the replay, you can actually go back after the stream and podcast ends. I'll be re-uploading it as a podcast format. I'll also be actually uploading this to some other platforms as well, predominantly for podcasting. But on YouTube, you'll be able to go back and skip to the parts of the video that would bring you the most value. So we actually have a number of other things we're going to hop into today. Let me see. I'm not a gamer. I actually have a good. We're getting a good number of questions here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna actually hop into the book right now. So I want to get into Mike's book, and I want to make sure I say it correctly. How to Write a Novel That Matters. And then what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll do more of a Q&A segment after the book section. So keep throwing in your questions, keep them coming. We're actually going to be doing a direct Q&A with Mike and myself after the book section, because I want to bring you the most value and I want to help you tell a story that matters. So keep posting the questions in the comments and we'll be circling back to them after this section. Now, this is also a good chance to shout out let me see. Let's see. Don't forget, if you are enjoying this segment, let me make sure I have my banner ready. Don't forget, if you're enjoying this podcast, tap that like button. Let us know that you're getting value out of it, because the more you engage, the more it puts it out to other people. And our goal is to share this with as many creative writers and as many writers as possible. Okay, so let's hop into it. So, Mike, I think what I wanted to do, as we're touching on, because I have a couple of questions for you about your novel. I want to really dig into your newest novel, which I know you just published. I figured it would be really cool to do a brief excerpt reading of it. So I'm going to do a brief reading from the novel. Let me pull it up on my screen. Awesome. So I'm going to be doing a brief reading from How to Write a Novel That Matters, Crafting Stories with the Power to Captivate, Enlighten, and Inspire. So this is from one of the sections titled Fiction as Art. And then we'll touch into some questions, and we'll talk about the journey and what it really means to craft a story with that matters. Okay, fiction is art. The process of creating fiction is often referred to as a craft, but writing is also an art. To fully understand theme, we must first understand fiction as art. In the middle of the 19th century, Edgar Allan Poe referred to writers as artists and fiction as works of literary art. He noted that to render his work universally appreciable, the author needs to create a work of fiction that excites the heart and satisfies the intellect. 100 years later, American novelist John Gardner built upon Joe's observations, stating that an important work of art is at least some of the following: 1, aesthetically interesting; 2, technically accomplished; and 3, intellectually massive. From these earlier observations, I conclude that one approach to analyzing fiction, including theme, is from these three aspects of art: emotional, intellectual, and technological. Stated differently, fiction as art may be viewed from the perspectives of the heart, the mind, and the craft. This chapter addresses the emotional and intellectual aspects of fiction as art. The technological considerations, the how to of the craft, will be covered later in the book. Why write fiction? Something every author should ask himself or herself from time to time is this: why do I write? Reasons for writing may be classified as either internal, for the writer's own benefit, or external, for the benefit of others. First, let's consider the internal reasons for writing fiction. Some of us are introverted, inhibited, shy, or socially awkward, making it difficult to communicate verbally. Writing provides an opportunity to express oneself in a way that allows people to feel like a well-functioning social being. According to Hungarian playwright Lajos Igri, without exception, everyone was born with creative ability. It is essential that people be given the opportunity to express themselves. Every human being needs an outlet for his inborn creative talent. If you feel you would like to write, then write. Another reason to write is that completing a work of fiction, regardless of its quality, may produce a sense of accomplishment or, even better, pride in something done well. Or, as Igri notes, the urge to be outstanding is a fundamental necessity in our lives. But let's face it, writers are human and, as such, crave attention. As Igri puts, we want to be noticed. We want to be remembered. We want to be important. We can achieve a degree of importance by expressing ourselves in the medium which best suits our particular talents. Another consideration is that writing fiction has the potential, however improbable, for an author to earn a fortune. And for an even longer term payoff, there is the possibility of creating a work that may be valued by readers long after the author is dead. Something of us that can live in perpetuity, a form of immortality. The external reasons for writing fiction are to help readers have a better life and to touch people in a way the author couldn't otherwise. Writing fiction may be viewed as a form of community service, as in helping the world to be a better place.
Jared,
And
you are a great reader. You do that so much better than I would have.
oh, thank you so much. Thank you. It's I appreciate that. I enjoy the reading process, and it comes from 15 years of customer service and 10 years of acting. If I wasn't such a strong writer, acting probably would have been a higher interest.
Okay.
But it's once again like I really just try to understand the writer's mindset and sharing it. And I loved how this introduction kind of digs into the art of fiction. I'm like, I absolutely love that. That really resonates with me. I love your reference with Edgar Allan Poe, and I absolutely appreciate how it's really understanding the psychology behind why writers are choose to start writing their novels, why they want to express themselves, and it kind of gives you that like sneak peek and like the motivation, the passion, and the drive. And I think that's absolutely phenomenal. So I wanted to do that. So as we like dig into this novel, let me see. So
Jared, I can't hear you.
all right, here we
There
go.
we
You
go.
know what? It's technical difficulties. I'm like, we got 40 minutes into the stream with no technical difficulties. So you know what? Just praise. It was probably because I pulled up the book itself on my end.
Okay.
Any type of program like makes the improves the likelihood. But all good. So we got into the book itself. I was super excited. So I wanted to learn. So you just published this novel, right? About within the last couple weeks, correct?
April 2nd was the official publication date. Yep, that's a brand new one. I don't even have a book to show you. I've got my what they call a proof copy. It has the
Ooh,
proof on it. I don't even have the regular things. This is all fresh, and
ooh, that's so
I'm
exciting.
I'm pleased that there's already reviews up and it's already selling, and I'm quite excited. It's off to the best start of a book I've ever had.
Awesome. So can you kind of walk us through what was this journey like for this book in particular? So I know you have your share of fiction books in previously, but this book really focuses on the craft of writing and theme. What was your inspiration for the book? And what's the one thing that you really want the readers to take away from it?
The little bit of background on it, when I first started writing, as I've mentioned, I would read books about fiction, and I got a little frustrated because a lot of it didn't make sense. So I decided to make it a goal of mine to write whatever I had to explain how fiction works. And this is my fourth book about the craft of writing fiction. And the reason I picked theme as my subject is because theme is the part of fiction that I understood the least. So if you want to learn a lot about something, write a book about it. And
That's a really good idea.
the first step was that I had lots of articles that I've accumulated over the years that from Writer's Digest magazine and others, and notes from books I'd read, and I accumulated all this information and dumped it all into typed it all into a Word file, and began the process of editing, sorting it out into categories, and building some chapters, and just trying to make sense of it all. And I really didn't have really didn't have a sense of where I was going when I started the project. I really didn't. It was a journey of discovery. I didn't know where I would end up. And what I ended up with was so much more amazing and satisfying to me personally than I ever imagined when I started. And I really believe it explains theme in fiction better than anything that's available. More completely, more comprehensive, and a more clear explanation of how theme works.
So, without going too much into the book, would you be able to share for our audience, like, what is theme? I'm sure if I Googled it, I'd probably see about 15 different definitions of what theme might be or could be. What's your definition of theme, and why is it important to writers?
Great question. That was one of the first roadblocks I had right away was what is theme, and how do you define it? So I started breaking it down, because you're right. There's dozens of different explanations, and some of them are conflicting. A lot of them are. And theme, basically, I boiled it down to the simplest definition I could think of, and the theme is what the work of fiction is about. That's as simple of an explanation as I could come up with. It's also pretty worthless from a writer's point of view, because it's too simple. It doesn't tell you anything. But it, as a starting point, it created a starting point saying, okay, what a work of fiction is about. Let's explore that and break it all down. And that's what I've done. I've broken the fiction down into themes. And instead of, what the book is about, it may be one thing, but the reality is any one particular story or work of fiction often has dozens of themes. And the more complicated it is, the more themes there are. And it was a challenging process to sort out, but it all came together in the end.
That must have been such a rewarding feeling. I never would have thought of starting a book or starting a novel with not knowing the subject material and using the process to explore and best understand it, because clearly there was a need for it.
It wasn't for me personally, and it
Mhm.
turns out there's a lot of people out there that are interested, and they should be. The feedback I'm getting is, most common thing is, I've been working on a story, and now that I read this book, I see where I can improve it, and that's
Aw.
what we're trying to do.
Aw, that's one of the most rewarding feelings, isn't it, right? Like
Feels
when we're able to kind of put out some type of like writing knowledge, either through our experience or our learning, and be able to bring value for writers who are in the process, in the middle of it, maybe struggling, maybe trying to figure it out. And then they read it and it's like light bulb, aha moment. I absolutely love that. Is what would you say was the most difficult part of working on this book specifically?
most difficult. The most agonizing chapter I wrote was the one, message versus propaganda. I probably
Interesting. Okay.
I probably spent 2 months at least agonizing over that chapter.
And
And
was it because you just didn't didn't know kinda like the direction of the chapter, you didn't really know how to frame it?
all of the above, plu- plus the subject of propaganda is a sensitive kind of a subject. Nobody
That's
wants
very
to
true.
nobody wants to their writing to be referred to as propaganda. I mean,
Mhm,
it's a hot word. I mean, it's associated
mhm,
with Nazi propaganda and
mhm.
the various words combinations that are not very favorable. Nobody wants to think of their work as propaganda. So my I felt like I was tiptoeing around it. What's the difference between the message of a story and propaganda? Well, if you look at the definition of propaganda in the dictionary, it doesn't distinguish um, it di- misinformation or intentions of uh, ill intentions.
Mhm.
So the conclusion I came to was that message and propaganda are basically the same word,
Interesting.
and that took some tiptoeing around. I ended up with it with an area handling it the way I felt proper. I mean, was appropriate, and I
And
but
how
all
did you come up with the solution? What was like was it just like, "Okay, I just need to word this, I need the right word choice."
it came down to, I just need to tell it as it is, as opposed to
Okay.
trying to be politically correct and avoid stepping on people's toes. Although I did agonize over the diplomatic language I used, and I think I found the happy medium. And the bottom line is, don't worry about it. It's all propaganda. Every book's got propaganda. I mean, there's always a moral to the story, and
Mhm.
the true definition, the dictionary definition of propaganda is that, yeah, that even that innocent uh, Jack and Jill has a message. Propaganda.
I think it goes into that idea, right? That certain things, certain stories we write, certain messages that we put out there can be perceived. We hope it's perceived in one way, but it could be perceived in a different light, an opposing light, negative, positive. And I think, well, we don't have any control over the way that people perceive it. We have control over the way that we want to write it and the way we want to put it out there. And I think, and I've heard from a lot of influencers I see online and a lot of writers, is that if you put out something like propaganda, if you put out a message and people feel strongly about it, that's actually success, because you want, if people, whether they love it or if people disagree with it, there's always going to be people who disagree with your work, and people disagreeing with it actually shows that they care enough about the subject that you've done the right work. Now, if you have 95% of your audience disagreeing with something, then maybe that's a learning opportunity. But I think a healthy balance is what I've seen.
One of the ways I address it too is you have to keep the marketing involved. You're right. If 95% of the people hate it, you're not going to sell very many books. You're not getting any compliments.
Only your mom, only your family's buying it.
Yeah, maybe not even them.
They're like, yeah, I put it on the wish list for next year.
Yeah, there you
go. Okay. So, all right. So we've gone into the hardest part of the book for you. So, when you think about actionable strategies and you think about writers who are working on their stories right now, or probably in a first, second, or maybe like third version of their draft before they've given it to an editor, do you have any actionable advice for how these writers can employ theme or employ like the understanding of theme into their novel to make their story better?
Yes. Without dealing with the specifics of your ending,
Mm-hmm.
a fundamental question is, are you going to have a happy ending where the character achieves the goal of the story? Or are you going to have an unhappy ending where the character fails to achieve the goal?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it going to be a third choice where the ending comes up going a different direction than either of those?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the most fascinating, memorable stories in terms of resonance, and those that are huge, is that they came up with an ending that went sideways. And those are the ones we tend to think about long after we've closed the book and moved on. They come back and haunt you. It's the ending. The ending took an interesting twist that made it hard for you to forget it, or the ending left you going, they have to go back and think through the whole story again to realize to replace it, because to reorganize it in your mind to make sense of it. And those are the ones that are particularly satisfying.
Interesting. So you mean less in that the ending, less than that it was like a poorly written ending in terms of how it connects to the rest of the story, but more that it was thoughtful and engaging? Or that it was like not like the reader like wasn't expecting the ending?
Well, I'm not sure how I'd portray it that way, but if you come up with a nice clean ending, you know, the hero rides into the sunset with the girl, you know, they got the girl, and I mean, it's a nice clean ending, and you quickly forget it and move on because you've read 3 dozen of those books already, you know. But you know, it was an entertaining while you read it, and it was a satisfying ending. But it's a nice, clean, tied up in a bow ending. Now if it turns out that the ending is not so clean, and we've seen some movies this way, you've read books that are this way, those are the ones you remember, the ones that don't end so clean. You know, they might have a happy ending, but there's a negative twist to it. It's one of those, you succeeded, but nah, you didn't get everything, or you failed, but you know, there was a silver lining. and you feel like, yeah. It's so I could break down stories and encourage writers to think of whether you're going to write an optimistic story where the hero, the main character gets the goal, or a pessimistic story where they fail. The third alternative is an ironic story, one that takes a twist, an ironic twist, and those are the ones that are the pure gold if you can pull it off. Not the easiest thing to do. But
why do you think that is? Why do you think that ironic? I have the feeling that a lot of writers actually are aiming for the ironic ending, but usually end up with one of the first 2 endings. Why do you think that's so difficult?
Well, because it's not easy. I don't have the answer to that.
Like, how do we write a story that has an ironic ending and is a bestseller and millions of people will want to read? There's the secret.
Yes, that will be the next book.
All right, how to write a best-selling novel.
There you go.
With an ironic ending.
I'm still working on that one. Yes.
You and me both.
Okay.
Awesome. When you think about maybe like media, and this is just like a side thing, when you think about maybe like a movie or a TV show or even another fiction book, which does an ironic ending very well, are there any that come to mind that you would suggest writers check out?
In my book, under the example of a complex story,
Hmm.
I delve into where the crawdads sing. It is a complex book that one of those, when I got through reading it, I couldn't put it away in my mind. I kept rethinking it. I couldn't even figure out what the plot was to it. It just seemed like it didn't have a particular plot. It's so complicated, but
Hmm.
it really gnawed at me. And one of the goals, one of the challenges of this book was to explain where the crawdads sing and make sense of it. And to do that, I developed a theme analysis template where I break down all these themes into
Interesting.
categories, and
Okay.
you should be able. In fact, I did. I took Little Miss Muffet as a simple story. I mean, it's
Everyone
a
knows that one. Little Miss
okay,
Muffet. Yep.
yeah, okay. I mean, it's a very simple story, and I analyzed it with this template to show that you could take the very simplest of stories, to
Hmm.
and analyze it. And then I also analyzed where the crawdads sing, which was much bigger project, and
Hmm.
and broke it down. And I was worried that I wouldn't be able to finish it and come up with a
Hmm.
satisfactory conclusion. But it all came together, and it makes sense. And I've been getting great feedback on it.
I absolutely love that. I love that you did a breakdown of both like a classic fairy tale, I would say classic children's tale, and then a classic novel, literary work that are both very compelling. But you're saying that in your book you have a specific template that can help writers actually understand the theme of their that they can use themselves.
Yes. Yep.
That's awesome.
And
That's absolutely incredible.
you can analyze your own story. You can analyze, pick any novel you want. You can use it to analyze the movies and plays you see. Um, Teachers could use it to help their students break down stories, and they should be. It's not going to happen overnight, but over time, I hope they do. And the I took it one step further and said, okay, how do you use this template to analyze your own manuscript? And I took a fairy tale of Puss in Boots, and took that, did some minor editing just so it's readable, and analyzed it and showed how I would revise it to bring it to make it more up to date. I mean, let's face it, it was published
Mhm.
200 years ago. Storytelling
Yep,
has progressed,
just a
and
little bit.
I mean, it was a good enough story. So I mean,
Mhm,
it's still very much you see it in advertisements and whatnot, very much alive,
mhm.
but definitely could use some improvement. And I show how you could do that, or how I would do it through using this template as a tool for reworking your own manuscript.
That is absolutely incredible. I love when you read writing books and they give you specific tools throughout the course. They usually, especially when they do like a deep dive into well-known works, but they give you a tool that you can actually take away with you to improve your own process. So I think that's pretty incredible. As we're thinking about like takeaways, I'm thinking about your novel. So for the audience, Mike, where can they find your book? So if somebody's interested in buying it, where can they get it? What avenues are there?
The only spot that this book is available on is Amazon,
Mhm,
the Amazon franchise. It's
mhm,
available on Amazon.com here in the U.S. It's
mhm,
also in Canada, United Kingdom, various parts of Europe, and Australia. Not
mhm.
sure where else it is.
You're like, it's some other parts of the internet. So what I'll do, I'll be throwing up the links to both Mike's website if you want to check out more about Mike, and then also the links to go to buy the book on Amazon on how to write a novel that matters. I'll be throwing that in the details of the video at the end of the stream. So I'll be doing that for you guys if you want to go check out and buy the book. And it looks like one of our audience, Vaughn, is asking, is there any opportunities for signed copies?
That will be a little tricky. I encourage you to buy the book, and then when we cross paths, I'll be happy to sign it for you.
It sounds like we're going to have to we'll have to do some networking at some writing conventions.
There we go. I'll look forward to meeting you in person, Jared.
Awesome. So I felt like that was really informative. That was really helpful. I learned a little bit about theme over here as I'm still trying to understand and really be like, all right, so what is theme? And I actually want to know more. So I'm definitely planning on digging into your book a little deeper. I think what I want to do is I want to pull up, I'm going to dig into the comments for just a second. Let's see what we got. So it looks like we had a couple people who were interested in from a few of the platforms in the book itself, which is super exciting. So once again, I'll throw in the details, the links to the book at the end of the stream. And I think now is probably a good time. Why don't we hop into some Q&A? And then I'll wrap up with a couple questions after that. So I'm just going to pull up a couple questions that it looks like some of the audience have been asking over time. Once again, if you have a specific question about writing, about working on your novel, or about theme, drop it in the comments right now, and we'll touch into it. So the first question I'm seeing here is from Vaughn. So he said, hey, I'm a farmer by trade, but when do you become a business owner and not a gamer? Can they merge? Interesting. So I think this is great because, Mike, I know you had a different background from writing originally. How'd you merge the two lifestyles?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed my career in accounting and investments and banking, but I also don't fish, I don't hunt, I don't play golf, and I only chase one woman at a time. So I have extra time on my hands. So writing has been on my hobby for 25 years at least. Mm-hmm. And recently, late last year, I retired from banking, and now I'm devoting myself full time to writing, and looking forward to the new adventures to that. But writing is a business. You can be an authorpreneur. I consider myself an authorpreneur. Since my publisher went out of business, I've got enough entrepreneurial spirit. I said, well, I'm going to, rather than start sending out queries, I decided to do it myself. That's not for everybody. There are plenty pros and cons, but I consider myself a writer and a publisher, independent publisher.
Mm-hmm. And this actually brings up a great question based off what you were saying. When you were writing during the earlier part of your journey, while you still had more responsibilities with your career, how often were you able to write, and how did you find that balance with career, family, writing?
I wrote virtually every day.
Okay.
Whatever opportunities popped up. I've written before breakfast. I've written in hospital rooms. I've written in airplanes, airports, coffee shops, restaurants, at home, whatever opportunities I could. I've always been considered probably a little geeky because I carry around a briefcase, or did, and I always had my story there. Going on vacations, I go to breakfast in the morning on vacations and write, or at least
I love that. A writer after my own heart. It's like me carrying around my notebook. I love that.
If you're a writer, you write. You can't help it. It's like a disease. That's what some golfers say. It's a disease. You're a writer if you just can't stop.
Writing is the best disease you'll ever have. So during the process, how did you prevent yourself from, or how did you prevent writer's block? Because so many writers deal with writer's block, especially when they're trying to balance all the complexities of life. Did that ever happen to you?
I know what you're talking about. I don't perceive I have writer's block because of what I already mentioned. If I feel myself getting stale and I feel like it's just not flowing,
Mhm.
Uh, for one thing, that's when I know when it's time to quit for the day. But I
Mhm.
also have learned not to come back to that same passage of writing the next session.
Yep.
Sometimes, come back after a meal or after sleeping, and your mind is retooled, rebooted, and you come. But I always start with something. The next chapter, next page, something,
Mhm.
next scene. So it's starting fresh. Preferably something I haven't read in a while. That's why I'm constantly revising because I'm passing through the manuscript. It's always something fresh. I've got to take a start improve it. The objective is to
Mhm.
improve whatever I'm working on. So I just
Mhm.
keep going, and I very seldom get. If I start to get stumped or get blocked, I just move on. Don't give up. I just move on to the next chapter or something.
That's an absolutely great strategy. If you ever feel like you're about to get bored, or if you feel like you just wrote a section where it's like this not the vibe, just do something else. Like I absolutely love that.
Skip ahead.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm of the mindset where, like, for me personally, I have to keep working through it. But I know at this stage in my life, like, I know I have the perseverance to get through it. But for a lot of writers who struggle with writer's block or who struggle with sitting down to write consistently, especially if you're stuck at a part in your story, like, that's a
Yeah.
great piece of advice.
If you know what your ending is, you can pick up a different part of the manuscript and
Mhm.
work on it. The easiest for me was just to work to the next chapter. You know.
That's really good. Or for some of our writers, work on book 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh yeah, I typically write 3 books at a time.
I wonder, do you think that's a common thing for writers to be working on a couple stories or projects at any given time?
It is for me because we call it a pipeline.
Mhm.
I'm finishing up one book, like I just finished up the book that's now published, but I've
Mhm.
got the next one. I'm well into the manuscript, trying to get it ready for publication, and I'm trying to get it to the point where I'm proud enough to show it to my first reader and also to my first editor. And then the third book is further down to be started yet. I mean, it's just that far. It's just not much more than an idea. It's actually an outline,
Mhm.
and just keep leapfrogging. So you get bored with one thing, you move to the next.
That's some great advice, and I think that that makes sense, especially once you finish the couple drafts of the book, and it's a process to go through the editing, the revision, and then ready for publication. That totally makes sense, and I think that resonates with me. Probably a lot of our writers on here. So let's see. Next question from Soul. A question about characters. How do you know when you've put them through too much? I know this can vary from genre to genre, novel to novel, or author to author. How far is too far when putting characters through events written to break them?
Well, the um, if the character is going through something that is so melodramatic, the reader will be turned off. You've gone too
Mhm.
far. You want to uh, instill emotion, generate emotion in the reader, but you don't want to appall the reader or get them frustrated to the point where they close the book and say, I'm disgusted.
Mhm.
So you have to keep your reader in mind and also use your own judgment. You don't want to do things that would be considered so cruel that it'll turn off lots and lots of people. These days, there's a lot of tolerance for that, but I'm not sure I've got a better answer for you, other than use some common sense. And that
Mhm.
is, if you think you've gone too far, maybe you have. Then again, the tolerance these days for anxiety is quite high. And but the other thing is to just forge ahead and finish what you're doing, make it awful, but then move on. You'll get a different perspective the next time you come around. It'll be fresh to you.
Yep. That's another great strategy. I think so. If this were me and I were dealing with, is have I broken my character too much? Like if I'm writing a story and every obstacle is just a tragedy and I kill off a character every single chapter, is are my readers still going to be attached to the characters? Have I done enough like setup for the world and all the other elements? I think a perfect example of this um, is the TV show from years back, Game of Thrones, which whether or not you've seen it or read it or not, it was very well publicized in the media when the last seasons came out, and it changed and disrupted the entire seasons of the show because the direction what the characters went through, they put to such an extreme that didn't connect with what they had set up in the first 6 seasons. So I think if I were working on my own story, and if I thought, okay, this potentially too much, I think I would save that, and then I would have that as a specific question when I brought it to my editor or my proofreader, depending on what stage it is. Those are like good questions. If I'm giving it to an editor or proofreader, I'm also giving them a list of questions of being like, these are the questions on my mind for these chapters and these sections, just something to be aware of as you're working on it. So that'd be my advice as well. All right, awesome. And then let's see. I'm just digging into the comments. It looks like interest in the book. We're talking about some of the politics and some of our background. It's about me. Yeah, and so commented while we were talking about that. They said they moved on to the next chapter when it bugged them. So absolutely, that's awesome. Oh man. Let's see. There's music to inspire with. Let's see. Vaughn has another question here. He says, Jared uses music to inspire him with writing. Do you have a similar thing, or poems or an epic that helps you write?
I do not. I can write in silence, or I can write.
Okay.
I can write with loud noise around me. I grew up on a farm. One of your viewers is from a farm, and in my high school years, I was fortunate. I was able to. My brother and I each had a separate room up on the upstairs of my grandparents' house, which is right across the lane on the farm. It was a two-story
Interesting. Okay.
house. Our family was in a smaller house, but my grandparents were hard of hearing, and they always had their TV turned up as loud as it could go with Mitch Miller playing or whatever else was on TV.
Mhm.
So I was doing my homework with loud music. I've learned to tune everything out.
Interesting. So you're used to just when you sit down and write, you're in your own world.
Yep.
Does it ever happen where your family or anyone tries to like talk with you and you're like, well, I'm in my own world now?
Well, I am happily married, and when I'm interrupted by my wife, I smile and pay attention.
Sounds like you know the right strategy over here. I only when I was writing and when I was back in California, the only one I was interrupted was by my cat, and then usually she would just want to be petted. I'm like, yes, but I'm also working.
That's right.
Oh man, Soul said the same thing. They've done that as well with their partner. Okay, awesome. So those are some absolutely great questions. Let me see. So as we're kind of wrapping this up now, I'm thinking about the next section of the podcast. So I have one final question for you, Mike, and then we're going to actually be hopping into a free write, which we'll be doing. You're more than welcome to join us after you hop offline. We're going to be doing a free write. I'm actually going to generate a random image, and we're going to do a 20-minute free write and see what comes. Mike, I like to challenge myself with the craziest things. I don't actually expect other writers to ever do it. I'm like, how can I challenge myself with a writing thing on a live format? And then if I fail, I'll just laugh at myself as long as I'm entertained.
Okay.
Okay. Question. If tomorrow were your last day on Earth and you could leave one final quote for writers to remember you by, what would it be?
Enjoy the process. None of us know where our books are going to go, or whether they'll be successful, or whether we'll even finish them. But if you're really a writer, you enjoy it. And if you love it, learning more about it, just enjoy the process of writing and learning more about it. And remember, it's the journey that is rewarding, not necessarily that final, ending. So enjoy the journey, wherever it takes you. And happy writing, happy reading.
Enjoy the process and enjoy the journey. Mike, I absolutely love that. I love the idea of enjoying and just being a part of the process itself. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a really cool conversation, and I feel like we've set up a really good initial groundwork for our Creative Right Now podcast. Once again, if you want to learn more about Mike or you want to publish his book, I will be throwing up his information in the details of the video. You can go check out his stuff. Mike, what is your website one more time? I don't have it pulled it up in front of me.
It's my name, Mike, at, well, my website is MikeKlaassen.com. That's my
Awesome.
website. Yeah. So it's that simple, easy to find. The trick is to remember to spell my name with two A's and two S's and a K up front. But that's MikeKlaassen.com. Easy to find.
Awesome. And then you can also check out Mike's book, How to Write a Novel That Matters, Crafting Stories with the Power to Captivate, Enlighten, and Inspire, right on Amazon. And then, Mike, how much is the book right now?
Oh, good question. I don't. I think it's $8.99. We set a low
Awesome.
price to start with to encourage people to hop in and try it.
Awesome. And that's an easy price as a writer. $8.99 is how much I would spend on like a Starbucks.
Really?
Except this book, you'll like get exponential value out of it. So definitely go check it out. I'll throw up the link in the details. And that's all that I got for you today, Mike. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
Jared, thank you so much. This has been fun.
Awesome. We'll have to do it again. I'll definitely be bringing you back when we're ready to write how to write a novel that becomes best publisher, best selling publisher.
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Mike. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Okay. Awesome. So that was fun. That was very, very awesome. I think I'm hoping that you got a lot of value out of this experience and out of this podcast, this interview experience. But the journey is not over. So I wanted to do something different for the Creative Right Now podcast. Now, if you've been with me, which most of you probably have, you know that my daily writing sprints are working on Last Scarecrow over the past 2 to 3 months. I wanted to try something different for this podcast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a free write exercise, which you yourself can actually join me on. If you feel like doing something different, I'm curious to see what happens. I'm curious to see like what, if we get inspired by this and just see what shakes loose. And then this is only 20 minutes. And then you can actually say that you've written for the day. So this is actually a really easy way. Now, what I'm going to do, let's see. So I have to pull it up on my end. So I'm going to pull up. So I'm going to pull up ChatGPT, and we're going to generate a random image. We're going to generate a random image based off whatever principles I want to put into it. And then that image is going to be the inspiration for a free write. So, all right, let me throw this up, share the screen, and all right, awesome. So I got my image generator here. Now I'm asking myself, like, what type of image would be fun to write about today? So I'm with, when I do ChatGPT, I always ask myself, all right, so I want you to generate an image for me with the following properties. Let's do something. Let's see. We've been talking a lot about theme and a lot about character journeys. So let's do something that revolves around a character. Generate an image for me with the following properties. I would say let's do a fantasy type character and it looks like you guys are talking about Last of Us. You know, I'm a fan of Last of Us. So we're going to go a fantasy type character in a post-apocalyptic setting. Let's see. So we're generating an image for me with the following properties: a fantasy type character in a post-apocalyptic setting. Ooh, and then let's give ourselves some type of object. in a post-apocalyptic setting, dealing with some random object which is creating an obstacle for them. So we'll create a very easy potential story that's creating an obstacle for them. This image is meant to be used. This image is then meant to be used to inspire a free write exercise. All right. So this is the prompt that we got. I'll throw it up here in the comments as well. All right. So you guys can see I posted my I posted the question to the comments. The question that I'm putting into it is, all right, and I'm going to generate it. So drum roll, we'll see what happens. Generate an image for me with the following properties: a fantasy type character in a post-apocalyptic setting that is dealing with some random object, which is creating an obstacle for them. This image is then meant to be used to inspire a free write exercise. Oh my goodness, I love that. Ooh, that is interesting. So it's given us two options. I'm actually going to use this. Why don't we pick? You can pick either option because I actually feel like we have two very different potential stories here. All right, this is great. Okay, so let me see. Let me think the best way to do this. All right, and then I'm going to pull up my word processor. Let's see, we don't need that. All right, so let me reformat my end so I can get this set up. We're going to do free write. Perfect. And then I'm going to pull up the timer as well on my end. We'll set it as a 20-minute timer. I'm actually super excited about this. That the images that it gives us are actually really cool. Are really, really cool. So I'm kind of like, I'm just seeing the image for the first time. Clearly, we just set the prompt for it. Oh, wait, actually, I need to do this. I'm going to blow that up, blow that up. All right, and I'm formatting on my end so that way we can all be involved in the free write. You literally just gave me the start to Animal Instincts. Woo! I'm like, that's awesome. I love to hear that. We literally just got some inspiration for a book that I know you're working on. Oh, I love that. That's incredible. My job is done. Time to hang up my hat. Okay, so let me see. Let me see if I can try to have both of them. All right. Okay, so it looks like this is what I got here. All right, so I got the timer set. I had to set up my screen so that way you guys can see both of them. Let's see, I'll do it like that. And it looks like both you guys can see the image. Perfect, even better. There we go. All right, awesome. So here is the challenge. So I'm going to set the 20-minute timer. Feel free to join along if you want to join me in this free write using one of these images as inspiration. Now, remember, the goal of a free write is just have fun with it. Write whatever comes to mind, right? There's no limits, no expectations. If it's something that you're already working on, you can do it as part of your pre-existing story, or do something brand new. The goal of the free write, have fun, and let's see what shakes loose. It looks like we have the options of a wizard. This kind of, okay, I'm not going to prejudge. So we have these two figures with two different type of options. We always like to use some type of character or any type of obstacle. And you guys know me, I cannot write unless I throw on some music. All right, writing friends, let's see what we got anymore. So I have 20 minutes on the clock. We're going to write what comes to mind, and that's right. Oh my goodness. There we go. I blew it up on my end so you can read what I'm writing. Oh my goodness. I don't even know what. All right, we're just going to keep going. All right, and there is my free write. Oh my goodness. That was an interesting experience. So I hope that you guys were able to get some writing done yourself. I came out with a fun little free write out of this. So I ended up going with the wizard like picture, and I think I came up with an interesting story. Well, let's see. I'm going to do the reading. I'm going to read through my free write because I actually am surprised that I came up with a full beginning, middle, and end. And I think I only went over like one or two, one or two chapters or one or two minutes. Okay. So based off this free write, this is what I came up with. The omniscient glowing blue cube greeted him with the tone of an artificial construct. The blue light, which emanated from the cube, was enchanting, mesmerizing, and peculiarly alluring to boot. The old prophet rolled his neck and checked that the staff of knowledge was still firmly positioned on his back. He knew the tool was important, which is why he kept it on his belonging at all times, but he could no longer recall why it was. Somewhere deep within his soul, there lay a burning question that had to be asked. There was an answer which he needed to know. The fate of all life hung in the balance, but as he approached the artificial construct, the question was lost to him. Would you like some cake? The artificial construct directed at him with an air of welcoming. What a peculiar question, my little blue friend. Why, are you a baker? The old prophet inquired. While I am not considered a baker amongst my kind, I do have knowledge of over 1 quadrillion kinds of recipes and can create a dish most to your liking. The prophet watched the artificial construct warily, realizing for the first time it wasn't actually talking with him in the conventional sense. He, the prophet, spoke. Well, the answers were directly communicated into his mind, as if it were being uploaded to his brain like a navicomp. My intelligence extends far beyond your basic navicomp, the artificial construct responded. The old prophet missed a step, realizing he hadn't actually spoken any words. He turned to face the strange curiosity and brought a hand to rest under his chin, thoughtful as he began to ask. You can read. He stopped himself and continued thinking. My mind? The mind is no different than the tongue, is it not? On second thought, he paused. I'll have some cake. The old prophet felt a cold, hard material in his outstretched hand, resting behind his back. He swung his arm around, smelling the sweet aroma of cake. Upon seeing it, he instantly began salivating. Flour and sugar vanished from our world over 100 years ago. How? A magician never reveals a secret, quoted an earthling from the 21st century. The old prophet lifted the plate with the most delectable looking piece of cake he had ever before witnessed. The frosting had multitudes of color, while the breading could only be described as lush. He moved a finger to grab a piece of the cake, but an eating utensil appeared in his outstretched hand. Thank you. Consumption of organic products separates the savage, quoted 31st century magician. The old prophet used the utensil to cut away a thin, nimble slice of the dessert, scooped it up, and raised it to his mouth. Already he was salivating beyond measure as the slice of cake approached his teeth. Halfway between his lips, he paused. Why was he eating cake when the fate of the world was at stake? He instead brought the slice of cake to sniff it, smelling for any hidden substances. I assure you, our cake is vegan, gluten, dairy-free, organic, cholesterol-free, heart-free, bipardonate, glutate, milactral, and disease-free. The old prophet nodded. It all seemed about right. He then chomped down on the most magnificent dessert known to the history of mankind. As his senses took him into a world of pure delight, he closed his eyes in pure ecstasy, enjoying the sensations that delighted every part of him. He felt like he was floating in the clouds, and nothing of any consequence mattered. Suddenly, he remembered his mission and the entire history of humanity. Those types of desserts had been outlawed because he tried to open his eyes, but found himself unable to do so. Drifting amongst the clouds, the artificial construct gave off a blue light as it analyzed the old prophet's body on the ground. It lit up with the pure knowledge that it had finally calculated the true path to achieving victory. Once more, it zapped out of existence as it left behind a piece of parchment that floated in the air and landed precisely on the old prophet's decaying corpse. The parchment read, "Let them eat cake." End free, right? Oof, man, that was An interesting little free ride exercise. I was like, I don't know what I saw the cube and I was instantly thought of the game Portal. And then I was thinking of the Queen song, the Queen song references Let Them Eat Cake, which I think said Marie Antoinette. And it was just funny. I don't know why those were the two references that came to mind. I hope that you were able to get some writing or hopefully some inspiration done during your free write. How's your storytelling coming along if you're here in the stream with me? Let's see. I'm just looking through the comments. Let's see. And Apple, it looks like you guys have had some good stuff going on. Aw, thanks so much on my charisma stats. I appreciate you, my man. Man, I'm so invested. Yeah, I know you're talking about Last Scarecrow. I just want to know the Scarecrow's name. All in good time, my friend. We're hitting the 60% point of the novel. Might be a little further, especially as I'm exploring the nest. We'll get to explore the hag characters more tomorrow. I'm having a lot of fun with that section. That's funny, Vaughn, that you mentioned Marie Antoinette, and that's I was thinking the same thing with the Let Them Eat Cake. Where are we in the hero's journey? I'm a little lost. Um, well, I mean, this story was just a free write, so this was just some random writing exercise. But I mean, in terms of Last Scarecrow, when I'm usually working on it, I'm probably I'm approaching the end of Act Two. I'm approaching the as the villains are closing in and the stakes are getting harder for the hero in terms of where I'm at in the hero's journey. I'm not quite at the build up to the climax just yet. But that's will probably be coming up in about 5, maybe 10 chapters. So the story. Awesome. Always happy to give you guys some awesome free write motivation and inspiration. So awesome. So that was a fun little free write. Once again, I wanted to thank all you for joining us today for this podcast. As always, we can't call ourselves writers if we're not getting some daily writing sprints in. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. I didn't know what image I was going to get, and that was quite an experience. Hey, what's up, Bobicus? Welcome to the stream, my friend. We're actually just we're just hitting the tail end of our stream today. So if you checked out the earlier part of our podcast today, Creative Right Now, we actually had a really great conversation with author Mike Klaassen about how to tell a story that matters with his new book that was just published. So I'm going to throw the details down in the video below, but definitely go back and check it out on the replay. There was a lot of value. We talked about a lot of different elements, from obstacles of like, how do you deal with your story throughout the writing process, common obstacles writers deal with, and what is theme, and how can you really use theme to leverage and highlight your story and really make it matter with readers. How do you really understand the ending? That is so important for keeping readers and really growing an audience and getting readers hooked. So we touched into a bunch of different topics. We had a really fun time in our interview and our conversation. As I look ahead into the next section of tomorrow. Of course, I'll return for my normal daily stream of Kauffman Writes. Yeah, and more to come. Stay along with the journey. I'm going to be doing some analysis on how today's podcast went as I'm working on developing the next round of podcast episodes. I have some exciting writers, authors, and speakers to chat with and bring onto this podcast styled episode. So stay tuned. Right now, my plan is Monday through Friday will be my normal Kauffman Writes episode where we can just chat about creative writing and do our daily writing sprints. Saturday is our review and critique show where you can submit your stories. And once again, if you want your story read and you want a piece of your story read aloud and you want critique, this is a free thing that I do for the community. So send your excerpt for next Saturday's reading, and I would be more than happy to dig into it. I believe I already have a couple submissions for next Saturday, so I always suggest the earlier the better, so that way you can guarantee your spot in next weekend's stream. So that'll be next Saturday. And then next Sunday, I may be hopping into my next podcast, my episode 2, or I might hold it off for the following week. I still have yet to figure that out. Yeah, Bob, because your story was really cool, actually. I remember your story with the mechas and the mech units was actually really, really cool. I would love to take another crack at a section of it. Absolutely. Definitely feel free if you want to read another segment. That'd be super cool. I was like, I don't think that I got any other. I've gotten a lot of fantasy excerpts, but I haven't gotten any more mecha in that realm. So that was definitely a fun story to read. I always love stories that have very diverse and unique characters because it gives me more to write off, more to act off. And back to writing it. So that's a possibility. Wonderful. Woo! Well, I'm here streaming daily. So if you ever need a writing partner or accountability partner, I'll be here. Glad to see you back on, my friend. I know writing is a process, and sometimes we can write consistently. Other times when life is busy, we can't. We just have to be kind to ourselves and just be aware of how much time we can actually commit to it. So I'm really happy that you're back in the writing process. Awesome. That is all that I got for you today. Don't forget to like this stream and let me know that you got value out of this on your way out. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and get some creative writing done. Remember, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow.